Hey y'all, welcome back to another episode of In the Kitchen with Baker Girl. Thank you, Jesus. It is another beautiful day to be in the kitchen. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to make these delicious brioche donuts from scratch. So we have some traditional round donuts, and then I also have these cute croissant shaped donuts. I'm going to show you how to make both of these in today's video. Don't forget to like and subscribe and leave a comment if there is a recipe you would like to see me bake on my channel. Let's get baking! So I'm going to be using my KitchenAid stand mixer today, and I have my mixer bowl ready. So I'm going to start off by, I have my scale underneath my bowl just because I can be a little bit more accurate. And whenever you're scaling a recipe, you can always go up simply by multiplying. And that's easier to do when you're using a scale. So I'm going to start off. Here I have some whole milk, and this is ever so slightly warm. And to my milk in my bowl, I am going to add some instant yeast. Now I'm using instant yeast and not active dry yeast. If you were going to let this recipe rest overnight in the fridge, bake it the next day, you can use active dry yeast. You can use instant yeast as well, but instant yeast is a little bit more faster than active dry yeast. So I'm going to sprinkle my instant yeast right over my milk. Now, I know a lot of recipes tell you can mix the instant yeast right in with the dry ingredients. I don't do that because all yeast needs to be hydrated, and you can still get little flecks of yeast in your dough if it's added in with the dry ingredients. It doesn't really bloom like it should. So just sprinkle your yeast over your milk, and it will always hydrate and activate a little faster that way. And to the yeast and the milk, I'm going to go ahead and add in my sugar. Now I'm using raw cane sugar, and I actually took it and blitzed it in a spice grinder just to break it up, because raw cane sugar is very coarse. So you do want to blitz that up. Most donut recipes don't use a lot of, okay, now I'm getting sugar dust. Most donut recipes actually don't call for a lot of sugar. Whew, there it goes. That's kind of funny. Most recipes donut recipes do not call for a lot of sugar. But these are brioche donuts, and you do want some sugar in them. They're not like your average donut. So I'm going to give that a little whisk just to make sure that the sugar and the yeast is all nicely mixed in. You don't need to worry about dissolving the sugar at this point. It's going to dissolve. You just give it that little jump start, adding it with the milk and the yeast. And also too, it helps to feed the yeast. So now I'm going to go ahead and add in my flour, and I'm using two types of flour today. I have bread flour and I have all-purpose flour. Now, the reason why you use two types of flour is because the bread flour gives you a nice, chewy, bouncy donut. The all-purpose flour gives you a nice, soft donut. You can use all of either one, but you get a better donut when you combine the two together. Now I'm going to go ahead and add in my salt, and I'm using Pink Himalayan sea salt today. The reason why is, even though I said it can overwork, it can cause your dough to overproof. So you do want to be cautious about using this. However, I know today I'm adding butter to this dough, and I'm adding egg to it. I'm also adding a little bit of sourdough starter to it as well. So I kind of want the dough to have the activity that it needs, instead of just kind of, this is going to be a one day dough. So if I was going to do it overnight, I would use the regular fine salt. So I'm going to go ahead and sprinkle my salt and go ahead and let that mix in. And then I'm going to add in my egg, and I'm just using 1 egg. You can use more eggs, but you get a lot of liquid in your dough using more eggs. So I'm just going to use 1 egg and add in the 1 egg. Oop, over she goes. And I also have some sourdough starter that I'm going to go ahead and add in as well. So let me get a spatula and add in my sourdough starter. You don't have to add sourdough starter to this. But again, it does 2 things. It gives you a very tender dough, and it also adds a nice flavor balance because this is sourdough discard. So it's nice and acidic. You won't get much, it's not going to help with the rising. That's what the yeast is there for. It won't make your dough rise. It'll just kind of balance out the flavor. And also, because it is a fully hydrated flour, it will make your donuts even softer. You can use a Tangzhong method, which is cook a little bit of flour with some water and then let it cool to, let it thicken and then let it cool and add that to it. You can use either one. So, and one more thing I need to add is some pure vanilla extract. And I'm just going to add that's good. It's very strong, so you don't need a whole lot. So now it's time to put this on the mixer, and we're going to start mixing and let the dough fully start to mix before we add in the butter. Okay, so go ahead and add my paddle attachment. Turn around and then go ahead and start the dough. Now I'm going to start the dough slowly and let this start to mix. When your dough starts to come together, and you can see it starts to look somewhat like a messy ball, and it's started to ball together on the dough hook, that's when it's time to add the butter. So I'm using a high-fat European butter for this, and it's so cold in the house. I actually had to stick the butter in the microwave for a couple of seconds because it's quite cold in the house. So you're going to start by adding your butter in chunks. You never want to dump it all in at once. I'm just going to add it in a chunk at the time while mixing on a medium speed. It doesn't have to be super slow, but you do want to have your speed up pretty good. Add it in a chunk at the time. Make sure each piece of butter is fully incorporated before you add in the next piece. That'll prevent your dough from collapsing. Add in another piece. Now, as you mix your dough may become stubborn, and it'll start to just kind of stick to the sides of the bowl instead of to the dough hook. And you'll find butter smushed all over the place. Be patient with your dough. You can increase your speed a little bit. Go ahead and kind of keep it moving, but just be patient with the dough. Don't add any flour or water or anything at this point. Just be patient with it. Last chunk of butter goes in. Now we've got all the butter into the dough. It's all nicely mixed in. So just let it continue to mix until you no longer see any butter pieces. We're still on a medium speed, not too high at this point. And you'll notice how the dough will start to, it'll begin to slap against the sides of the bowl. It'll be a bit of a sloppy slap, but it will start, you'll see little ropes of it start to come out and smack against the sides of the bowl. That's good. And keep your dough mixing. At this point, set your timer and mix your dough. I'm going to let this dough mix for about a full 5 minutes. I'm going to go ahead and set my timer for 5 minutes and let it mix. Let it knead. You'll know your dough is ready because it will be glossy and it won't be quite so sticky. It'll be somewhat tacky, but not sticky. If your dough is still sticky, let it keep kneading. Okay, so my 5 minutes is up. And now it's time to have a peek at the dough and see how it feels. And you can just stick your finger on it. And it's no longer sticky. See, there's no dough sticking to my fingers. I can actually touch it and my hands come away clean. So that's a very good sign, and that's exactly what you want. You want a nice, soft dough. Now, you can do a window pane test, which is take a bit of the dough, pull it out, and if you can stretch it super, super thin and it won't break, you know you've passed the window pane test. But with brioche, since it has a high knead anyway, plus a high amount of fat added to it, I never really worry about a window pane test with a brioche, but you can definitely do the window pane test if you're not sure about it. So I'm going to go ahead and take this off of my mixer. Thank you, mixer. You've done a nice job today. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and take it off of my dough hook. And it's a really nice, soft dough. Okay, so I'm going to let this rise in this bowl. I'm not going to dirty up another bowl. So I'm just going to, I push the dough to one side and then spray that side and then push the dough to that side and spray this side. And everything rises better when it's in a nice little round. So just make it into a nice little round. And then lightly spritz the top. And I'm going to place a large plate over this. You can use plastic wrap. I just prefer to put a large plate over it and let it rise for 1 hour. And then just stick it in the fridge and let it rise for another hour. The main thing of it is you want the dough to be doubled in size. So it doesn't have to be super big. Don't overprove it. It just needs to start to rise and begin to double. So let's put this dough to sleep for a couple of hours and then we will come back and finish making the donuts. So while the dough proves, I am going to go ahead and get ready on my apple filling. So I'm going to peel an apple. Here I have a Honeycrisp apple, and this is a massive Honeycrisp apple, so I only need this one apple. And as I say, I don't want giant chunks of apple. So I'm going to dice the apple. All right, and then I'm just going to cut my apple off the core. Now, this apple filling is fairly similar to the apple pie filling that I used in my apple pie video. Fairly similar. It's just in a smaller proportion. Okay, so I've got all my apple diced, and here I have a saucepan. I have a small saucepan instead of a larger one. I'm just using a small one because this is a small amount of apple. You do want to cook this apple filling fully, unlike with the apple pie filling where we just kind of pre-cooked it. This time you want to completely cook the apple filling because once we go to pipe it into the donut, obviously the donut's going to already be cooked. So you don't want raw or half raw apples going in. So we're going to cook this completely. So I'm going to go ahead and add my apples to my little saucepan. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and I have some butter. So I'm going to add some butter to the pot. And I have some sugar. Once again, I'm using raw sugar. Add in the raw sugar. And then here I have salt. I have some cinnamon and I have some ground mace. Now, as I said in my apple pie video, I prefer ground mace to ground nutmeg. But if you prefer nutmeg to mace or allspice or cloves or whatever combination of spices you want to use, or you may want to leave the spices out altogether. So I'm going to go ahead and add in my spices. And I am going to add into this a tablespoon of lemon juice. So here we are at the stove, and I'm just going to toss this so that my butter starts to melt, and my sugar and my apples. Make sure the butter is nestled down in there. And I'm going to put a lid on this and let this begin to develop some liquid from the apples. Once your apples have cooked and they're nice and soft, and they still have a good amount of liquid, you can go ahead and take them off the stove, and we will puree them. That smells so good. They look really, really good. So now I'm just going to use a potato masher and mash these up. If I was making a larger amount of this, I probably would maybe use an immersion blender. But this is a tiny amount, so no need. I'm just going to mash it up with the potato masher. So I will go ahead and add in about half a teaspoon of vanilla extract. And a scant half a teaspoon, because like I say, this is fairly it's fairly strong, so about a half a teaspoon. And I'm just going to let this mixture cool completely. You can let it chill overnight, but I'm just going to let it cool completely until I'm ready for it. So I don't need to do anything else to this. Just let it cool, and it's ready to pipe into the finished donuts. Smells good too. Now for my raspberry filling for my raspberry donuts. I have in this bowl, I have some raspberries, I've got some sugar, and I've got some lemon juice. Now I'm going to let this start to bubble on the stove. As soon as it starts to bubble, I'm going to add in about a teaspoon of cornstarch, and it's going to thicken it up and then let it cool. You don't want to cook this for no more than just a couple of minutes, because then you actually start cooking the raspberries and they'll start to lose a lot of their taste. So just a few minutes on the stove until it starts to get nice and bubbly and the raspberries are broken down. And here it is. And that's the speediest little raspberry sauce you'll ever make. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and pour this into my teeny tiny little bowl. You don't need much. I got a little bit left over. That'll be a nice amount to spread on my toast. Okay, so the dough is ready and it's nicely risen, as you can see. The dough scraper there. It's nice and puffy. Now it's cold because it rose for exactly 2 hours and 15 minutes. Now, I did let it rise 1 hour at room temperature, as I said, and then 1 hour in the fridge. So the dough is now properly risen and it's cold. And this is the perfect time to work with it. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to tip it out onto my work surface. And I'm going to divide it in half. Now, there's no need at this point to flour your work surface. The dough still has a good amount of oil on it from where I oiled the bowl. So I just need to divide this in half. You can weigh it if you want to. I kind of do want to, but I won't just for ease. And I'm going to place this other half back in the bowl and recover it. And we've got something that resembles a bit of an even square. Now I need a rolling pin, so let me grab my rolling pin. And I'm going to ever so lightly dust my work surface with flour. So just ever so lightly dust it. You don't want a ton of flour down at this point. And I'm going to dust my rolling pin and keep my bench flour there. Lightly dust my rolling pin. And I'm going to roll this into a rectangle. There's no need to go crazy with the flour. Just lightly roll this into a rectangle. Keep it even if you can. Now, we need to cut this into the croissant shape. So I've got a pizza cutter and I have a ruler. The ruler by 10. Okay, so we want each piece to measure. Okay, so starting here, I'm going to cut just little slits where I know I'll want to make my cuts. So I'm going to start off with 1 inch and 1/4, and another inch, 3 inches and 1/4, another 3 inches and 1/4. And the last one is usually the fattest one. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, and I'm just going to take my ruler. As a matter of fact, I think I can come over just a little bit and just kind of roughly mark that out where I'm gonna cut. So there and there. Okay. Now we want to start cutting on a diagonal. So I'm gonna start here and cut straight up. Cut straight up. And then cut your diagonals, cut your 4 pieces in half on the diagonal. So cut straight up through here. Okay, and then cut straight up through here. And you can, if you need to use a ruler to kind of help you get into that corner, use it if it's necessary for you. And just cut straight up through there. Any croissant, pick it up, lay it down, and then begin to roll. And you can stretch it as you roll it. It'll give you more layers. And there you are. You have a teeny croissant. And always put your tip in underneath. That way when they rise, they won't start to unravel themselves. So I'm going to set that aside and keep rolling. So just pick your dough up, lay it down, stretch it out if you need to get a wider base, and roll it up. This will be nice and long because these pieces are always longer. And there we are. Roll it up and just keep going. Okay, so I've got all of my little donut croissants nicely rolled up. And here I've got a baking sheet. Actually, I need to move y'all over. There we are. I have some room for my baking sheet. So I've got a baking sheet, and I'm going to place each one of these on a piece of parchment, which this is. And I'm going to place them, on each one on a piece of parchment paper. This makes lifting them in and out of the fryer a lot easier than if you had to pick them up off of the baking tray. And the last one goes onto the piece of parchment. Very nice. Now you want to cover these, and I am going to cover these with plastic wrap. You want to let them proof in a warm place until they are nice and they've started to rise. You can tell they've gotten nice and puffy. Do not overproof them, please. If you overproof them when you go to fry your donuts, they will collapse and you won't be able to get your filling in them. So I'm just going to cover these with a piece of plastic wrap and let them proof in a warm space. That may take anywhere from 20 minutes to 30 minutes, but keep your eye on them. Okay, so now we have the remaining half of the dough. Now, this one, you can be a little more freehand with it because we're just going to roll this into little rounds. So I'm just going to split it in half and then divide each half in half. So to shape it into round, this is how I shape rounds, whatever I'm baking. Just take the edges and fold them over and just go around and pinch them. Use your thumb to pinch the little edges in. And then just take your hands and roll them into a little ball. You can do this on the countertop, but since sometimes you don't always have counter space to do that. So I have just gotten used to doing it by hand, on my hands, because, you know, if you're working and sometimes depending on what kitchen you're in, you don't always have all that counter space. So you can have a whole bunch of dough in front of you and there really isn't, you know, there's no space to do all that rolling stuff. So for me, this is easier. So, okay. So I've got all my little dough balls rolled and I have my baking sheet. I also have my parchment, my little parchment rounds. So I'm just going to set each one on a piece of parchment. I'm such a picky for evenness that I'm trying to make sure they're all even on the tray. It doesn't matter. That's just me. Okay, so let these cover them and let these rise until they are nice and puffy. And once again, that'll take right around maybe 30 minutes, maybe 45 minutes, depending on how cold your dough was. If your dough just came out of a solid cold fridge, say it's been in the fridge overnight, you're probably figuring on these taking a good, decent 45 minutes to an hour in a warm place. Okay, so my oil is heated to the correct temperature, which is 335 degrees. And so now I can go ahead and add in my croissants. So you want to be very, very careful. So I'm just going to set it on this and lower it into the oil, just like that. And no worries, the paper just slips right off. You want to fry a couple of these at a time. So there's no need to, you don't want to overcrowd your skillet. And I'll show you what I mean by the paper just slips right off, just like that. Take the paper off. Kitchen tongs make a big difference. And just kind of bob them around. When you notice that they're starting to get nice and brown on one side, just flip them over to the other side, just like that. I've got some paper towels sitting right over here. And I'm going to go ahead and flip this one. Nice. I think I'm brave enough to do that. Yep, I am. Be very careful whenever you're frying with hot oil. They look so good. And they're so nice and airy too. So all the donuts are finished frying and I'm just going to make a quick vanilla glaze to go on the donuts. So I have in here some powdered sugar and some vanilla extract. And I have a little bit of whole milk. I've got about 2 tablespoons. Okay, had to switch to a metal whisk. That little silicone whisk was not working. Okay, so just add milk until you get your glaze to the consistency you want. Runny. Now we just need to dunk the donuts. Now, before I dunk my donuts in my glaze, I do want to go ahead and pipe my filling in them. Now, here I have my apple filling and I have my raspberry filling. I have them both in piping bags. I put the filling in a piping bag and I have a metal, a round metal tip in. Now, these are the croissant donuts and these are the round donuts. These are for my dad. These are for me because these are a little browner than those, and that's perfectly fine. If your donuts get a little bit darker, as clearly these are a little bit darker, that's perfectly fine. They'll just, these, because of the shape, they needed a little bit longer to fry, and therefore they got a little bit darker, but that's perfectly fine. You need a wooden dowel or something that you can use to poke a hole in your donut. So I'm just gonna poke a hole in my donut like that. Nice and well done donut, because you can feel it. And then take your round nozzle and just poke it in there. And it goes by feel, so that's good. You can feel it when your donut starts to get heavy, because obviously it's very light. You can feel it when it starts to get heavy. And that's how you feel your donuts. So poke in another hole. You can also do this at the bottom. You don't have to do it from the side. You can poke a hole from the bottom too. It works just fine. And ooh, I can feel it. I can feel it filling up. And just keep doing this until all your donuts are nicely filled. Now I'm going to go ahead and dunk my donuts into the glaze. I'm going to start off with a round one, an apple, and just give them a little round. There we are, swirl it around. And I'm just going to set it down. And you can glaze as many or as few donuts as you like. I know my dad, he's gonna prefer a donut that's unglazed, so I bet you can also pipe the glaze too. Okay, so all of my donuts are glazed. I'm going to go ahead and just plate them up. So I'm going to put the croissant ones on here. The glaze is still a little sticky. Let's see if we can make room for one more. There we are. And then as for these, I'm just going to set them right side up and place them in like this, right side up, the glazed side facing. There we are. And we'll tuck a couple of unglazed ones in too. Let's see. They look so good. And here are all of the donuts. They look so good. Oh, wow. And especially the little croissant donuts too. They look so good. And I did save one unglazed for me to sample just because it could be a little messy. So I'm just going to have a little bite. Thank you, Jesus. That's, thank you, Jesus. That's good. I gotta put put that down. That is really good. Mmm. Okay, let me stop. I better not take another bite because that is really, really good. Okay, maybe just one more bite. Nothing beats a freshly fried donut. That is so delicious. So I hope you will give this donut recipe a try. It's a little bit more work, but so is anything that's good and delicious and worth putting on your table. If you do, give it a try. Please let me know and leave me a comment and let me know. And the good Lord willing, I hope to see you all again in another video. In the meantime, take care, y'all. Happy baking.